Welcome to the best how to build cabinets video you're ever going to see, hands down. In today's video, we got two main topics. One, how we built each one of these boxes. Number two, durability test. We're going to be dropping these boxes from 20 feet. So if you want to know which one makes it, stay tuned. Quickly, before we get started, we want to go over three main things. Number one, are we painting or are we staining these cabinets? Two, you're going to ask yourself what quality of plywood you're looking for. These are usually described as A1 through D4. Number three, what type of core do you want for your plywood? So the three most common are veneer core. This is going to be lighter weight, very durable. You got particle board. This is going to be your cheapest option, but not really durable. And then you've got your MDF core. This is going to paint really nice, but it's also going to be super heavy. They also make a combination core, but for today's video, we're going to be using the veneer core. So get down to what everybody wants to know. Cost. How much does this cost? So cost is going to be determined by the grade of plywood that you get and where you get it from. All right, so for your different grades of plywood, you have A1, which is the top tier. Personally, I use B2 for most of my kitchen cabinets. That will run about $100 to $110 a sheet. Today's video, we're going to be using a D4. I paid about $37 for this plywood. This one I wouldn't use for kitchen cabinets, but for something like shop cabinets or something that, you know, you're not going to have to worry about voids and stuff like that. This one would work great for that. As you can see, one side doesn't look quite as good as the other. So for the other side, I would use that for painting and just make sure that this is like the inside of my cabinet. For today's video, we're going to be building a base cabinet. Standard dimensions for your normal base cabinets are going to be about 24 inches deep and 36 inches tall. Now, you got to take in consideration the depth of your face trim, which we're going to be using 3/4 inch. So we're going to rip the piece to 23 1/4. So that'll give us 24 inches. And then as far as the height goes, that'll be determined by how thick your countertop is. So if your countertop is going to be 1.5 inches, we're going to cut our piece at 34 1/2. Now we're going to be using our table saw today. We have it preset at 23 1/4. But if you don't have a table saw, a skill saw would work just fine. I just find it a lot easier to do on the table saw. All right, so for our second cut, we've already ripped the depth of our cabinets. Now we're going to cut the height. Remember that your traditional countertops are going to be about 36. So most of your pieces are going to be either cut at 34 1/2 or 34 3/4. We're going to cut these at 32 because I'm just trying to get as many cuts out of this piece as I can. Couple things to note when you're cross-cutting your plywood is when you're using a skill saw that it is bad about chipping the veneer. So the top side is going to be where it's going to chip. You can either run a piece of tape across here that'll actually help it from chipping, or just make sure that the good side that you need is on the bottom. Now you can basically run you a straight edge and pencil you a line for your skill saw, or you can use a clamp like this. I like to use this. This is going to make it super easy for me to get a nice straight cut. So all we're going to do is basically set it on here. I've already measured exactly where I need this, and then we'll clamp that down. You can see this was the top part that we just cut. You can see how it chipped this. Again, you can avoid this by putting tape across this, or if you need only one side to look good, the bottom side, as you can see, much cleaner. So we've got our two side panels and our back panel cut. Now we're going to go ahead and cut the base. Now what we're going to do is cut our stretchers, and for these, they don't have to be a specific width. I usually like to go about 3 to 3.5 inches wide, and I'll show you why here in a few. Now these will be going on the inside of the cabinet box, so we're going to cut them the same width as our box, which will be 23 1/4 on the inside. So this is our pocket hole jig. We're going to do some pocket holes for our stretchers. I like to do 2 on each end. Now before we start assembling the box, I just want to reiterate, depending on the type of plywood you went with, that'll determine on which side you want to show. So this is going to be the inside of our box. So if we were to paint this, I want the nicer side to be on the outside. For the assembly process, all I'm going to do is run a bead of glue on the side panels here, and I'm going to use trim nails to tag it together. So we popped our straight edge, and this is basically just going to help us line up our base panel, and when we go to put our glue on, it's going to help us guide us. I'm going to go ahead and do it on the same for the back panel as well. So again, the main purpose of this is just going to help me show me where my glue line needs to be. Now for the trim nails, again, this is not for structural strength. We're using some 18 gauge 1 3/4 inch trim nails to just tack this in place while the glue sets. We're also going to pop some straight lines just to guide us for our screws we're going to put in. So I'm just measuring this to the center of the base panel here. You can use a regular straight edge or you can use your tape measure. It doesn't have to be dead on perfect. We're basically just using this as a guide to put our screws. So the box is mostly assembled, but for right now it is just glue and trim nails. We're about to set our screws. You don't have to pre-drill, but I do like to do this. It's less likely that you're going to split the wood, and it's just going to make setting those screws that much easier. So we've got both of our side panels screwed in, as you can see. Now we're going to screw in the back side here. For the screws, we're just using a multi-material 2-inch screw. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to install our stretchers. Now, as I was talking earlier about how wide we want these, we usually do these at about 3 1/4 inches wide. A couple reasons. The main purpose of this is not just to add strength to the box, but we're also giving our countertop guys, whether it be a butcher block, something to screw to, or if it's granite or quartz, something to glue to. So we're giving a little surface area for that. The only thing you got to be careful about is how wide you make that stretcher. If this is going to be like a box for the kitchen sink, you need to make sure you've got enough space in the middle for that. Now, how I like to attach my stretchers is we're going to use a little bit of glue on each end. I'm going to use my nail gun to just tack it in place, and then we're going to use those pocket hole screws that we did earlier. Now again, this isn't for strength. Don't have your thumb there where you're shooting your nail. This is just to hold it in place. Now, we designed this box for the toe kick style that I like to do, but this works great if this is like a standalone box. If this was a cabinet in between two other cabinets, or if this was like the end and this side was going to be connected, we would have to do a more traditional toe kick where we L-shape cut this out just like so. But for this one, we're treating this as like a standalone box. So for this toe kick, we're going to bring it inside at about 2.5 inches to the face of the toe kick. We're going to use a little bit of glue because I just love using glue. And then just like we did with the stretchers, we're going to tack this in with some trim nails. And then we're going to lock it in with our pocket hole screws. Okay, so our cabinet box is pretty much built. We're moving on to doing the face frames now. Today we're going to be using poplar. This is a 3/4 inch thick by 1.5 inch, which is pretty standard for your face frames. This runs about 60 cents a linear foot from where I get it from. You could upgrade to a maple, which for me, where I get my materials from, would run about 90 cents a linear foot. Now you might be wondering, what does that make a difference on a whole kitchen? Well, depending on the size of the kitchen, that could be anywhere between $50 $100 and maybe $150 for an upgrade. The only reason you'd really want to go with maple is that it's a harder material. Poplar and maple both paint really well, but poplar is going to dent a little bit easier. Now, before we get into actually making the face frame, I do want to mention that there are cabinets that are frameless, but for today's video, since I'm trying to show you how to build a face frame, that's what we're going to do. A couple things you want to consider before making your face frame. We're going to pretend that for this one, we're going to have a shallow drawer and 2 medium drawers below it. Now, if this was to be up against another corner cabinet, one thing you'd want to take in consideration is that to make sure that when you open these drawers, it doesn't hit the handles of the opposing cabinet box over here, which has happened. So that might determine how wide your face frame is. For today's video, we're doing 1.5 inch, but in that instance, you may need to go 2.5 to 3 inch to move that drawer away from this box over here. So the first pieces we're going to cut are our vertical pieces for the box. This is the factory end, so I'm just going to cut this end off to clean it up, and then we're going to cut them at 32 inches since that's the height of our box today. So another thing to consider when you're creating your face frame is how wide do you want your face frame? I have been asked before, should there or should there not be an overhang? Personally, when I go to set my face frames, if this is a standalone box, I like to have it nice and flush when I glue it on. If this is going to be butted up next to another one, I like to do about a 1/16 to maybe an 1/8 inch overhang, but it really comes down to personal preference. Now we're going to do some pocket holes for our face frame. We've got our vertical pieces here. We got a top and a bottom piece, and then these are going to be our dividers for our drawers. Your pocket hole jig is going to have several different places. Since this is only 1.5 inch, we're going to use B and C and keep those nice and tight together. Just like so, and we're going to do this for all 4 pieces. All right, so we got all of our pieces drilled, ready to go. Before we put this face frame together, I just want to mention the different type of pocket screws. Keep this in mind depending on the material you're using. This is a poplar, so it's a softwood. You're going to want a coarse thread screw for that. If you were doing something like a harder material, like a hard maple, you're going to want a fine thread screw. Now, before we start assembling the face frame, I need to figure out where exactly I'm going to have my drawers set. So I'm going to go ahead and just measure 1.5 inches from the top. That is going to be our top rail. For our toe kick, since we have our base panel at 4 inches, we're going to put the top of the toe kick at 4 1/4, and it's 1.5 inches wide. Our top drawer, we're going to do a shallow drawer, which is usually a 3.5 inch drawer, and we're going to give ourselves 4.5 inches of total space for the drawer. So we've got the 1.5 inch rail at the top, 4.5 inches here, 1.5 inches for our divider. And then for this one, we're basically going to divide the total amount of space for our 2 drawers since we want them the same. Of course, this can be any size, but basically that's going to give us about 9 3/8 inch between each drawer and our center rail. All right, we got all of our measurements done. Now we're going to start putting it together. Go with a little bit of glue. Use our clamp. It's going to hold it in place for us. And then use our pocket hole screws. All right, so now we're going to attach the face frame. Again, this is my preferred method. There are different ways of doing this, but I'm going to show you how I like to do it. Got my glue spreader right here. All right, so our box is very close to being done. The only thing that I was going to leave y'all with is this is our toe kick for the cabinet. You can leave it like this. I personally don't like to. I'm going to put a little bit more of a decorative touch on it. And also, if you're sweeping around the base of your cabinets, if you leave it like this, sometimes stuff will get trapped behind here. So what we're going to do is take some pieces and angle them about 45 degrees to make it look a lot nicer. All right, so we've got our decorative piece cut. We measured this at 4 3/4 on the long side. Basically, all we're going to do is the end goal is to be like that, but we just need to notch it so we can slide it up under there. We've got our piece cut. We've got it notched. We're just going to add a little bit of glue and nail it in. All right, so here's a final look at my preferred method of building a base cabinet. So for this cabinet box, we're going to be doing a traditional toe kick. We're going to basically mark ourselves or our panels here at 3 1/4 tall and 3 1/4 inches deep. So we just cut out our toe kicks for our side panels. Now we're just going to pop a straight edge for our base panel, and that way we can just see where we need to apply our glue at. So for this cabinet box build, we're not going to be using any screws or nails. This is going to be only glue. We're going to rabbet the panels and then glue them together. If you're wondering why we might not use screws or nails for this, I wanted to show another way of building box if there was an occasion where you weren't going to be able to use screws or nails. So we're going to change out our regular blade and we're going to put our Dado stack in here. Now, what we did to determine how many blades we needed is I just took the material that we're using, kind of laid it up next to the blade, just to give me an idea. We've got a couple of spacers and a handful of blades. All right, so we've got our Dado set on here. Before you start cutting your good pieces, always practice on a test piece. We have our depth set at about 3/8 of an inch because that's how far we want them to go in. So we're just gonna go ahead and test this out. And we're good. All right, so we've got all of our panels cut for the box. We've got our rabbets done. We did accidentally rabbet it on the wrong end here. Obviously, if I was gonna be making this for somebody else, I'd have to recut this, but since this is just a demonstration, I'm not really gonna worry about that. All right, so we've got our toe kicks cut in our panels. I just want to go over some options and kind of what people normally do. In most of your cabinet build boxes, a lot of people use a 1/4 inch plywood. Not a huge fan of this. As you can see, it's pretty flimsy. So what I usually like to do is a 3/4 inch plywood. It's gonna be a lot more sturdy. The only thing you want to consider is if this cabinet is gonna be, the side is gonna be exposed. If you use a plywood, you will see the veneer core. So if you don't want to see that, you could always go to a 3/4 inch hardwood. It's gonna give you a nice cleaner look. Or you could, if you want the thinner, you could go with like this. This is a 3/8 thick maple. This is a glue up box. We're just going to glue this on, but most of the times I'll use glue and some trim nails. Since this is our glue up only box, we're trying to do this whole thing with no nails or screws. So I'm going to show y'all how we do that. We've got our face trim built. We're about to glue it on. All right, face trim is glued on. We're going to go ahead and glue our stretchers on. All right, so we're about to rip our slots in our side panel and our bottom panel for the Dado set. This is a 3/8 inch thick piece. That's how deep we're going to rip the slot. So we want to set our blade right at 3/8 of an inch, just like so. And then where we want to rip them on the panel, we're going to have some stretchers on the back side of the panel for support. And so what I like to do is just basically move this in and then fit it through the back stretcher. And then that's where our front panel will slide into, which we'll show you once we get it together. All right, so for this cabinet box, we're doing the 1/4 inch back panel, and we're gonna build the entire box out of pocket hole screws. As you can see, we ripped our side panels and our bottom panel. For the 1/4 inch panel we're gonna use, we did our pocket holes in our stretchers, and then we're gonna also do pocket holes in the base panel as well on the bottom side where you're never gonna see them. Before we start the assembly process, I just want to kind of walk y'all through what we're doing, why we're doing it. We've got all of our panels cut, we got our pocket holes done, we've got our toe kicks cut out. We're using only pocket holes for this build for multiple reasons. This is really, we're looking to do a durability test only using screws. Normally though, I would typically use trim nails to tack things together and wood glue to add extra strength. But again, this is a great option if you don't have a nail gun and you're trying to do it without showing any screw holes or nail holes. All right, so we're about to attach the toe kick. As you can see, we just drilled a couple of pocket holes on our side panels here. So this is just another way of attaching it if you don't want to glue it or nail it. Okay, as of this point, this box is only held together by pocket screws. So every single thing is used pocket screws. There's no other nails or any additional screws. as you can see, just like so. Our concept for this box was to put it together using only pocket screws and nothing else. Same could go for the face frame. Now, there's a bunch of different ways you can put on a face frame. Usually I like to glue it and nail it, but if you didn't want to put any nails in the finish of the face frame, you could use pocket holes, you could use biscuits, you could use a multi different ways of doing it. But for this video, I want to show y'all that we can put this on using pocket hole screws. The only thing to note that if you're going to do this, you'll put the pocket holes on the outside of the box, but you have to keep in mind that if you don't want that to show, you're either going to have a side panel for these boxes, or it's just going to have to butt up to another box where you'll never see it. All right, so we're about to attach the face frame. There's no glue. We're only using pocket hole screws. Normally, I wouldn't advise that. I do prefer to use glue, but for this demonstration purposes, we're only using pocket holes. All right, drops are done. Let's assess the damage. So box number one, my opinion, actually held up pretty good. This is the one that we used glue, trim nails, and screws to hold it together. Really, the only thing that came off was the face trim, and that's just because it was glue and trim nails only. Box number two, this one was strictly glue, no screws or nails aside from the face trim itself. But this one pretty much took a beating. You can see the side panel started to come loose, lost both the top stretchers and the top piece of the face trim. Number three, this was the pocket holes only with the 1/4 inch back panel, and as you can see, this one's cooked. It pretty much took the most amount of damage. Side panel's coming loose, back panel's gone, stretchers tore off. Really, the only thing that held on with this one was because we use pocket holes to attach the face frame. So if we learned anything, box number one with the glue and screws plus maybe pocket holes for the face trim is going to give you the strongest box.